Turn it up, swashbucklers. You're listening to Under the Crossbones, episode number 43. My name is Phil Johnson. I am your host for the show. Thank you for tuning in. I always appreciate when you tune in, and I appreciate when you leave iTunes reviews like KD53 did on iTunes recently. Gave us a nice 5-star review, and that's how our username is spelled, KD53. So thank you, Katie. I appreciate that a lot. Fun fact about the number 43, in numerology, the number 43 is introspective, analytical, and pragmatic, which is a perfect description of my guest today. My guest on the show today is Peter T. Leeson, and he is the author, he's an economist, and the author of a book called The Invisible Hook, which is about economics in the time of Golden Age piracy. Very interesting. It's a great book. If you haven't read it, definitely pick it up because it's very cool. And I've been trying to get Peter on the show for months, and I'll tell you why. He's a very special guest for me. Years ago, probably four years ago, something in that realm, I was driving through the middle of nowhere, USA, on my way to a gig on some dusty highway, and I was listening to the Freakonomics podcast, something else you should listen to if you have not checked it out. I was listening to Freakonomics, and they said our next guest is Peter T. Leeson. He's the author of a book about the economics of piracy in the Golden Age called The Invisible Hook. And then they went off to talk about something else. I think they were talking about anarchy, which he has another book called Anarchy Unbound. And so it's kind of an expert area of his. But I was like, oh, you could talk about the economics of Golden Age piracy? That seems like I didn't even know that was a thing that could be talked about. And I thought, gee, I'd like to talk to that guy, maybe if I had a podcast. And I wrote in my little notebook that I always carry with me, Pirate Podcast. And then that note sat in my notebook for 3 or 4 years until I finally got around to actually creating the show that you were listening to today. So Peter was like one of the guests. He was like number one on my list of guests that I wanted to get. And like I said, it's taken this long to actually get him on the show. So I'm very excited to have him on today. And we are going to talk about why the economics of a pirate ship and the governing of a pirate ship were so different from, say, the merchant ships of the time and things like that. We're going to talk about why the Jolly Roger was used and all that kind of stuff. It's a really great talk. You are going to totally dig it, so stay tuned for that. I want to thank everybody that came out to the shows in Colorado Springs over the weekend at Looney's Comedy Corner. Super fun shows. The Thursday night show actually did not happen because we only had 6 people show up, and the club didn't want to do a show for 6 people. So we took Thursday night off, and we watched the Warriors game. And it wasn't my fault because I wasn't the headliner. I was the middle act. So I will blame the headliner for not having enough draw for a Thursday night show. But the 2 shows on Friday and the 2 shows on Saturday were crazy good. Near sold out, amazing crowds, super fun. Things happened that I've never had happen in a show before. Like I was doing this little goofy physical bit with my guitar, and I whipped around to a lady in the front row, and she golf clapped me, and I had never seen that before. So that was fun. I was doing a bit about vampires, modern vampires, the sparkly, twilighty kind of vampires, and I said, gee, I bet you ladies like the vampires, the modern vampire stories, and a dude in the back went, yeah. And I stared at him, and the audience laughed. And I continued staring at him, and the audience continued laughing. And that went on for 30 seconds, and I'll tell you why I like that. I love the laughs that come from me not saying anything. Just a very subtle physical bit like that. I love them. Oh, so fun. So fun. Colorado Springs, interesting town if you haven't been there. Pikes Peak is there, the famous Pikes Peak. There's an Olympic training center there, because it's all high altitude-y, right? There is an Air Force base university right there. Lots of cool stuff right there, but they have food. And they have good food. And you wouldn't think of Colorado Springs like a good food town, but here's what we did. The guy I was working with, Trey Gallion, he took me to Rudy's Barbecue. And this is a guy, Trey is from Texas. He grew up in Texas. He knows barbecue. He said, I'm going to take you to Rudy's Barbecue over in Manitou. And I said, you're from Texas. Are you sure? And he said, yes, it's awesome. So we went over to Rudy's Barbecue, and it was amazing. We had the brisket, we had the smoked turkey, we had the pulled pork, we had the sausage. They give you a stack of white bread, and you just go to town on it, man, and it was so great. So if you go find Rudy's Barbecue, I guess it's an offshoot of a Rudy's Barbecue in Texas. So if you know Rudy's in Texas, this is the franchise or whatever you want to call it. Man, so good. Now, National Donut Day was recent, and I did not eat any donuts on National Donut Day because the lines were obscene. And truthfully, every day for me is Donut Day. So we waited till Saturday. We went the day after. And in Colorado Springs, there is a place called Amy's Donuts, which is fantastic. They got nice, fancy, creative, weirdo type of donuts, like kind of like Voodoo Donuts in Portland, if you've ever been there. That type of idea where it's just crazy cool donuts, right? So I was planning on going to Amy's, but I was looking through Yelp to get the address for it, and I ran across another place called Horseshoe Donuts that was brand new. Only had a couple of reviews, but they were pretty good reviews. So I walked into, we were staying in the comedy condo there, and I walked into the living room, and I said, Trey, we are having a donut challenge today. And so I said, we're going to go get 2 donuts at each place, each. So this was a total of 8 donuts being purchased. We went to Horseshoe Donuts first. I just pointed to the ones I wanted. I had no idea what they were called. She said, "Oh, that's the Air Force Blue, and this one is the Go Army." And I said, I wasn't trying to set up a rivalry, but all right, let's do that. And these were not cheap donuts. They were about $2 a piece, but totally worth it. Oh my gosh, they were so thick I could barely get my face around them. And super good. Cakey, very light, not like a Krispy Kreme, but still, it was almost like eating chocolate cake, except it was a blueberry. It was a blueberry donut. Oh, wow. Yeah. Very good. So we went to Horseshoe, and then second part of the challenge, we went over to Amy's, which was our original destination. There, I had the maple fudge bacon, which if you've been to like Voodoo or you've seen like the other maple bacon, they'll usually just put a strip of bacon on like a maple bar. This one, they did crumbled bacon. So it was a little easier to eat. You got a little mix of the flavors, a little bit better. Very good. And then I had another one called Chunky Monkey, which I assume was sort of named after the Ben & Jerry's flavor, Chunky Monkey. But it was like banana chips and peanut butter and super good. Here was the effect, though. I got 4 donuts, which I spent $8 or $9 for 4 donuts, which was ridiculous. But I had 4 donuts. I was able to get through 3 of them in my first sit down with these donuts. Trey was only able to make it through about 2, I think. And then I had to take a break and come down a little bit from the sugar high, just a little. And a couple hours later, I knocked out the last one. And then I went out and did 2 shows that night and had lots and lots of energy. So if you're going to Colorado Springs, Rudy's Barbecue, that's where you go. Then you go to Amy's Donuts and you go to Horseshoe Donuts. And that is the thing, right? So fun shows in Colorado. Thanks for coming out. While we're on that, let's talk about some tour dates. June 11 and 12, that's this weekend. I'll be at the Edgewater Casino in Laughlin, Nevada. June the 13th, Honda Casino in Pine Top, Arizona. June the 15th, I will be at the Ice House in Pasadena, California, doing a taping for Comedy Time, which is a stand-up comedy web series that has been around for a long time, and I'm very excited to be doing a set for them. June the 17th, I will be at the Throckmorton Theater in Mill Valley. This is a great show. It's called The Last Late Show, and the premise is that the world is going to end tomorrow, and this is the last late night talk show. So it's going to be really great. We've done it a few times. I'm a special musical guest. It's going to be great. June the 18th, I will be headlining at Sauced in Petaluma, California. Also on June the 18th, I will be hanging around the NorCal Pirate Festival in Vallejo. And I got a brand new toy. I got a Zoom H5 audio field recorder. And I will be at the Pirate Festival, at the NorCal Pirate Festival, doing interviews and talking to people and that kind of stuff. So if you see me there, come up and say hi. I'll be the guy in the long hair and the pirate shirt, which narrows it down not at all. And then after that, if you're not going to the Buccaneers ball, which I'm kind of hoping I might squeak into, but I will be headlining at Sauced in Petaluma that night. June the 24th, headlining at the Swiss Park in Newark, California. June 25th, headlining the Windmill Winery in Tracy, California. June 26th, I'll be at the Crow's Nest in Santa Cruz, California. And June 30th at Spice Monkey in Oakland, California. To get all those tour dates, if you want to see where I'm going to be near you, I know I'm coming to Washington. I'm going to Oregon. I'm coming to see you, Florida, in October. Lots of good stuff going on. Go to underthecrossbones.com, click on the tour dates button. That'll give you the whole lineup, or the whole shebang of all the stuff going on. Cool? Cool. All right. Yeah. So if you're digging the show, and I hope you are, listen to me yap and listen to cool interviews and comedy and music and all that kind of stuff, I hope that you will come on over to the support page and help me keep the show running, because that's what does it. If you go to underthecrossbones.com/support, there is a little PayPal box in there where you can dump in any amount of money that you would like. Could be $10, could be $1, could be $1,000. If you put $1,000 in the box, I will be your best friend for 2 months. That seems very specific. But anyway, put some money in the box, and it's like it's just a donation, and it keeps the show running. There's also an Amazon banner right there, and if you click on that banner and you click on through, you buy yourself something nice. Like I did. I bought my Zoom H5. I just bought a new battery for my GPS. Here's the problem, though. I'm not allowed to click on the banner. It's against the rules, right? But if you click on the banner and buy yourself something nice, I get a little commission for that. Helps keep the show running. All nice and good stuff, right? And if you want to be a sponsor of the show, all you have to do, go to that page, look at the details, contact me. We'll make it happen. It is cheap and easy. All right, you ready for me to shut up? I'm ready for me to shut up. We're going to do this now. Here's my interview with Peter T. Leeson, author of The Invisible Hook. Check it out. The first thing is I have to thank you for coming on and talking about your 7-year-old book. I'm sure it's something you're probably tired of talking about at this point, but I appreciate it. And you were actually the idea for this show because I heard you, I don't know how many years ago, on the Freakonomics podcast. And I don't remember what you were talking about on there, but they said he wrote a book about the economics of Golden Age piracy. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Ooh, that might be an interesting show. And I wrote down Pirate Podcast on my notebook. I was driving in the middle of the Midwest somewhere going to a gig, and that then sat in my notebook for the next 4 years before I finally got around to doing it. So this show is all because you wrote that book. So thank you. So tell me,
that's great.
So tell me why a book about pirates and economics? Why did you decide to go that direction?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of reasons. The first is that, as I think is true for a lot of people, I have a long-standing interest in Golden Age pirates that goes back to the time when I was just a kid. When I was very young, my parents took me to Disney World, and my favorite ride was the Pirates of the Caribbean ride.
A common story, yeah.
You know, I bought this little skull ring in the gift shop afterwards, and I treasured that thing for years, although I don't know where it is now. But in any event, so I have this very old interest in piracy. And it turned out that it had an academic application for me because my academic research, or at least much of it, focuses on the political economy of anarchy. So how it is that people do or do not secure social cooperation and good conduct when government is absent. And since pirates were outlaws, obviously they couldn't rely on government, so they seemed like a natural case study to sort of examine using that approach. And that led to an article, which then led to some media attention, which subsequently led to an invitation to write a book on the subject.
Oh, interesting. Where was that article published?
The original journal article was published in the Journal of Political Economy. Okay.
All right. And so what drew you to the study of anarchy in general?
Well, there are a bunch of different things. One is I have kind of, somewhat peculiar interests, I guess. I'm interested in for lack of a better term, which is not a good term at all, things that are different, things that are peculiar or unusual. In fact, the sort of other part of my research explicitly examines bizarre social institutions and tries to use economics to make sense of them. So anarchy kind of fits into that. The other aspect of it, which is a sort of, I don't want to call it political, but is a sort of worldview-driven approach, which got me interested in anarchy, is that I am a libertarian. And I have had an interest in libertarianism again since I was very young, not quite as young as when I was at Disney World, but since I was a teenager. And so, one strand of libertarianism, is particularly extreme, I guess, and sort of asks the question of how it is that societies might be able to function when sort of everything is privatized. And the work that's done on that, which is sort of the first stuff that I started reading on anarchy, is mostly is normative in nature. It's mostly philosophical, and it's not historical for the most part. It's not applied. It doesn't take a positive analysis approach, and that's sort of what economics does. So I ended up applying my economic knowledge and skills to that subject matter in part for that reason.
Okay, interesting. So and you seem to work, from what I was reading, generally with rational choice theory. Can you explain to me and my listeners what rational choice theory is?
Sure. There are lots of different definitions of rational choice theory that are out there. I should start by saying, and a lot of those definitions, well, I guess rational choice theory is kind of, in some ways, has historically been the approach that economists take.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to give you a straightforward definition here in a minute, but I just want to preface it by saying increasingly there's this new thing in economics, or relatively new, called behavioral economics, which in a way is an attack on rational choice theory. It's questioning that approach as the appropriate approach for economics.
Okay.
So that's all by way of saying there are lots of debates about what rational choice theory means and what it is. My own view is a very simple view, which rational choice theory simply says that people have goals and that they try to achieve those goals in the best way that they can given the constraints that they face. That's all that it means, which I think is a pretty uncontroversial thing, but you'd be surprised out there. There's quite a few people who seem to disagree with it.
How do you think that is contradictory to behavioral economics?
Well, behavioral economics has lots of different meanings to lots of different people. But I think the shorthand way of thinking about it is that behavioral economics, at least traditionally, sort of posits that people are irrational. Okay. That they behave in ways that are contradictory. They call them behavioral anomalies. Anomalous behaviors with respect to what a rational choice theory of that behavior would predict.
Okay.
And so in that sense, they're sort of diametrically opposed. There are other versions of it that say, well, look, rational choice theory is largely right, but we need to append it in various ways to sort of allow for psychological biases and other aspects of that can introduce irrational components. So they don't throw out the entire thing. But on some level, behavioral economics is always about challenging the rational choice claim.
Okay, all right, that makes sense. So let's talk a little pirates here. I read your book last about 4 months ago when we were trying to get an appointment together to do this, and I have the memory of a goldfish. So all these questions will be for me and for my listeners.
Sure.
And so, as you were getting into, how did you decide which aspects of Golden Age piracy you were going to attack from an economic point of view? How did you kind of decide how to divide that up?
I mean, I basically tried to focus on what I considered to be the most infamous practices of the pirates of the Golden Age. So the ones that we all have kind of heard about through popular pirate fiction and movies and books and TV. So those are the sort of ones that I focused on. Mm-hmm. Incidentally, the other thing, which was a constraint that I faced in doing that, was that I needed to be able to have historical materials relating to the particular practice in question in order to be able to research it and understand historically what was going on before I could apply the sort of economic lens to it.
Sure.
So it turned out that the infamous practices that I focus on were ones that all had substantial historical work pertaining to them written, and so that constraint wasn't really binding, but that's sort of how I approached it.
Okay. And what kind of historical materials were you looking at? What kind of stuff were you relying on?
Well, at the beginning, so there's an enormous secondary literature written by historians on Golden Age piracy. I mean, it's very large.
Sure.
Unsurprisingly, given that the topic is a pretty popular one. So I started there. And that took me a very long time. I mean, as I say, it's just a huge literature. But I'm also very fortunate, or I was fortunate at the time, to be in Washington, D.C., where I've got the Library of Congress. And there are considerable historical archival records that are available there, mostly colonial papers relating to piracy that I had access to. And then it was very fortuitous right at the time when I was sort of in the middle of doing the historical research component. I think it's a 4-volume set by a guy named Joel Baer, a historian. I don't remember where he's located. He might be retired now. But in any event, came out, and what it did was compiled in these volumes all of these extremely hard to find, basically rare firsthand documents relating to piracy and put them all together.
Oh, wow.
And that was such a huge boon to me. And it was just incredible fortune. The volume was like ridiculously expensive at the time. It practically bankrupted me to buy it, but it seemed like it was worth it. So
now we just all need to wait for that one to hit the public domain at some point.
Yeah, right.
Well, that sounds like, fascinating stuff that you were able to dig into that most other authors haven't had access to. Was there anything in there that you found really surprising that you weren't expecting?
There were, in the course of the historical research in general, there were several things. Probably the most surprising thing to me was that the Jolly Roger was a real thing. I was pretty sure going into it that that was going to kind of be a dead end because that was just going to be a sort of piece of popular pirate fiction. You know, it seems too good to be true. It's like made by Hollywood producers or something. But the fact that was a genuine and important part of Golden Age piracy was pretty cool. In terms of like the actual old documents, there wasn't anything especially surprising. And I should say, just so my now wife would go with me to the Library of Congress, and you can't take any of these papers out, obviously.
Right. Yeah.
So we were there with like a digital camera taking pictures of all these things. She did all the photographing, and then I would come home and blow them up. And it's all written in this early 18th century hand script, which is beautiful, but not always particularly easy to decipher. So then I would like spend hours trying to decode what one sentence on one of these things had said. So any surprises were overwhelmed by the incredible frustration that I felt, typically doing that.
Yeah, I've just trying to read some of that stuff. You're like, is that an and? Is that a the? What is that? And then it's and then it's something you don't care about anyway. As far as the Jolly Rogers, you were mostly putting forth the point that it was a fear tactic above anything else, that they were hoping that you would not engage by seeing the flag. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, that's part of it. I mean, I think the central takeaway from the Jolly Roger, so the puzzle that it posed, so this is the thing with infamous pirate practices in general. They pose these puzzles, right? Puzzles for at least rational choice theory again. If people are rational, this seems like an odd thing to do. So most criminals do not loudly announce their presence with a distinctive, bandit logo,
right?
To their victims or to authorities in principle. They don't publicly do that, and it seems like a peculiar thing for somebody who's engaged in an illicit activity to do. And so the puzzle is, well, why did pirates do this, given that they in fact did? And the argument that I offer is that the Jolly Roger acted as what economists call a signal. It was basically an effective way to distinguish themselves from other hostile vessels that merchant ships might encounter in the waters that pirates were traversing in. And the reason that it was important for pirates to distinguish themselves comes back to the point that you were raising, which is the sort of second part of the story, which is that if you were a merchant ship, in some colonial waterway in the early 18th century, you might encounter a Coast Guard vessel, which was a government-commissioned, vessel that was basically charged with preventing interlopers, these smugglers, from engaging in prohibited trade with the colonies. Or you might encounter a pirate. They were both hostiles, and the thing was that because the Coast Guard vessels were government-commissioned, they were restrained in how they could react to a merchant vessel that might try and flee at their sight or otherwise resist their advances. And so if a merchant vessel knew that it was being attacked by a Coast Guard vessel, it typically wanted to resist. With pirates, things were very different. So pirates obviously were not government-commissioned vessels. They were utter outlaws. And so they could respond however the hell they wanted to a merchant ship that resisted them. And so one thing that pirates did in order to prevent resistance, since battling with a merchant ship was expensive for pirates, was to adopt this policy of basically surrender or die. So if pirates could credibly commit to that policy, so if a merchant ship, instead of if it knew that it was being attacked by a pirate, it wanted to submit to it. The issue was that a merchant ship couldn't tell whether it was a pirate that was attacking it or a Coast Guard vessel just by looking at it. All these guys were using, in the early 18th century, were using the same ships. They all looked the same.
Sure. And
so pirates basically needed a way to communicate, I'm a pirate, not a Coast Guard. So they adopted this Jolly Roger flag. And I argue that, the reason that Coast Guard vessels couldn't simply imitate pirates by adopting the same flag was because the cost for them of adopting the flag, given that they were government-commissioned vessels, was very large. So if a Coast Guard vessel was caught with a Jolly Roger on board, its crew members could be hanged for piracy. Otherwise, even though it was engaging in roughly piratical behavior, it was technically legal and they couldn't be prosecuted for piracy. So for them, adopting the Jolly Roger it involved a very large additional cost. For pirates, this wasn't true. Pirates were already outlaws. Whether they were found with the Jolly Roger on their ship or not, if they were captured, the crew members were going to be hanged. So for them, it was free to basically use the flag of Skull and Bones.
Right.
So therefore, pirates alone would use the flag, Coast Guard vessels wouldn't, and merchant ships, in consequence, could reliably infer, upon seeing the Jolly Roger being flown, that they were under attack by pirates, not Coast Guards, and consequently knew to submit, which is what pirates wanted because that added to their profits.
Sure, certainly. And I think it's interesting that the pirates and the Coast Guards were so close that would be the thing that would tip the scales, is just a piece of fabric.
Yeah. I mean, you got to remember that. So the ships, as I mentioned, the vessels are all the same. I mean, pirate ships themselves were just seized merchant vessels, which is one of the reasons why pirates would pretend to be friendly ships. They didn't immediately hoist the Jolly Roger when they saw a potential prize. They would basically cover up their gun ports so that the cannon weren't visible, because that's one thing that distinguished them from merchant ships. And they would fly the colors of a friendly nation. And then only once they had sort of cornered or gotten sufficiently close into a prey would they then switch out the flags.
Right.
And same thing was true with the Coast Guard vessels. The vessel was, again, the same vessels that were used by merchant ships at the time. They were all identical.
That's interesting. You talk a lot certainly in the beginning of the book about the sort of democratic structure of a pirate ship and how that was different from the merchant marines of the time. And did you find that any of the things that were sort of invented on a pirate ship, were those ever taken back and used in the merchant ships?
They were not used in merchant ships. The reason is that the economic approach here basically says merchant ships are commonly viewed as for-profit enterprises, right? Mm-hmm. And what the economic approach that I use says, well, pirate ships are the same thing. They're also economic enterprises. They're trying to maximize profit. They're just engaged in plunder as the sort of means of production, as opposed to engaged in carrying cargo across the sea, which is what merchant ships were doing. So they're both trying to make as much money as they can. And the economic approach then says, okay, well, what would be the most efficient way to organize your vessel depending upon which activity you're engaged in, piracy or merchant shipping, in order to maximize profit? What would be the best way to organize? And the answer is that for merchant ships, you want to have a hierarchical organization with a more or less autocratic or kind of dictatorial captain who's in charge of everything. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that is that merchant ships had these absentee owners. So, crew members on a merchant ship were hired guys, right? The people who pooled all the money to form the merchant crew expedition were these sort of landed external financiers. They didn't actually sail on their ships. Right. But lots of their money was tied up in the ships. So given that merchant ships would be away at sea for very long periods of time outside the watchful eyes or reach of the guys who were funding it, it was in their interest to basically, in order to maximize profit, to hire somebody who would basically monitor and oversee the crew members to make sure that they didn't abscond with the ship, that they did the stuff that they were supposed to do, that they didn't steal from the cargo, and so on. And hence, out of that emerges this autocratic captain. Pirate ships, on the other hand, were very different. So pirate ships didn't have landed external financiers. On a pirate ship, the crew members were the owners. So because the crew members are the owners on a pirate ship, there's no monitoring problem. You don't need to have a third party, an autocratic captain, to sort of have a watchful eye over the crew. The crew's interest is already aligned with the owners because the crew members are the owners.
Yeah.
So democracy in that environment is the efficient form of organization. So when you think about it that way, it becomes clear why merchant ships never adopt the institutions that pirate ships did. It's because those democratic institutions on a merchant ship would have made merchant ships less profitable. The same reason why pirate ships don't adopt merchant ship institutions is that an autocratic captain on a pirate ship would have reduced piracy's profitability. So they're both doing different things because different things in their particular economic context makes the most money for them.
I see. Okay. And so the democratic process on a pirate ship must have gone through some sort of development process. Did you find anything along the way of where they were trying things that didn't work, or like maybe say the captain being more autocratic or not having the payments for injuries or any of that kind of stuff? Were they things that they tried that didn't work out that then got kind of washed away?
I didn't see anything like that. That doesn't surely that it existed. So you remember that there's this with history. There's typically a kind of selection problem. So the stuff that ends up being recorded is what economists would call equilibrium outcomes. So the stuff that worked is the stuff that lasts, and therefore the stuff that gets talked about and is observed and is recorded. The stuff that didn't work, right, gets weeded out, and so it often isn't around long enough for it to get recorded. So history tends to record these equilibrium outcomes. So the stuff that is recorded is the stuff that basically worked for pirates. Having said that, what we do know is that Golden Age piracy, which was, of course, the early 18th century, had predecessors in the Buccaneers in the late 17th century, in the early and mid 17th century. And you see some sort of proto-democratic features, some proto-Golden Age features on buccaneering ships, which obviously predate what the Golden Age pirates are doing. And surely in that, I would say, 70-year period or so, 80-year period, you get some evolution. But again, buccaneers are different from Golden Age pirates in that they were government commissioned vessels. Buccaneers were privateers, right? Right. They were a halfway between Navy ships or fully government licensed ships and pirates. And so they have some organizational aspects of basically both types of vessels.
Okay, interesting. How much of the process or how much of the economics have you seen filter into the modern day mode of thinking about these things?
Well, one thing that I was surprised about was there's this show on, I think Showtime, called Black Sails. Have you seen it?
Oh, yes. Yeah, it's on Stars, the Stars Network.
Oh, Stars. Yeah, Stars. Thanks. Yeah. So in the middle, I don't have Stars anymore. I did, but I watched most of the first season before we got rid of Stars. But in any event, so what you might recall is the very first episode of that show, it seemed like, to me at least, was basically beating the viewer over the head with like these facts about Golden Age piracy governance, right? The articles, the democratic election. I mean, it was like they were going out of their way to make this point about, look, this is how pirates are organized. And it was quite, it was pretty accurate. So I think that piece of it, has definitely filtered into popular culture. And of course, the idea that pirates are, in it largely for the booty is right. But at the same time, there's these lingering, there's this great romance about pirates, sort of, this free spirit stuff. And it was all, it was about freedom and throwing off the oppressive merchant ship captains, which is found in, that's sort of the analytical view, if you could call it that, that's taken in much of the historical work on pirates. And I think there's, not a whole lot to that. I don't think that really holds up, but a lot of that still ends up permeating popular pirate culture.
Sure, yeah. I recently spoke with Mark Hanna, who wrote a book about the influence of the pirates on land-based governments in the colonies, and how the colonies were really taking in a lot of money that was really based on, it was really blood money, essentially, from the pirate stuff. How much of that structure from the pirate ship do you find filtering into like even modern government and things like that?
Yeah, so I mean, this is another thing that really surprised me is that, the modern American system of government looks more or less, and the reasons for it looking the way that it does are more or less the same reasons that were articulated by early 18th century pirates, more than half a century before America's founding fathers put pen to paper in the Federalist Papers. You have constitutional democracy with separated powers and checks and balances. Pirates had all of that stuff more than 50 years before we did.
Right. And
the reason they introduced it, they tell us was basically the same reasons that Madison gives in Federalist. I think it is 51, right? You need to simultaneously, to secure social order, basically, and prosperity, you need to simultaneously endow an authority with some power, but constrain that authority so that it doesn't abuse that power.
Right.
And that's what the pirate system of governance was all about. So I think that's an absolutely astounding thing that doesn't get discussed enough. It doesn't get enough attention. And at one point, I was talking to some historians I was interested in, sort of as a kind of a lark, but I was still interested in it. The idea that, well, given the timeline here, it's conceivable that Madison, for example, could have had access to Captain Charles Johnson's A General History of the Pirates, where a lot of this, initial history is sort of laid out of pirate governance.
Right.
And so maybe the founding fathers, could have cribbed, at least in principle, from them. And so I was trying to track down what books were actually in Madison's library to see if he would have had a copy of it. And I didn't get very far, but yeah.
That actually was my next question. So you already answered it, but that would have been fascinating to find out if he was cribbing notes from the pirates.
Yeah, right. I mean, so Madison and Jefferson were both known for having these enormous libraries. I think the issue was, I can't remember if it's Jefferson now or Madison. It might have been Madison. His library at one point burned down or something, and so a lot of stuff was lost. But somebody told me that there was still like catalog entries, at least of what he had. So even if it wouldn't be possible, let's say he did have it, even if it wouldn't be possible to then go look and see, what notes he might have taken on it, which would be really cool.
Yeah.
We could at least know if he had it. And that shouldn't be, too much work. It's just that, like I said, it was something I was just sort of doing for fun. But
yeah. That would be fascinating to find out, though. On the flip side of that, do you see the pirate governance and design of their crews and things like that? Do you find that in like modern criminal organizations, gangs, mafias, things like that?
You do. Again, what you find, so I've done a little bit of research on this as well. What you find is, which is consistent with the rational choice approach, you find the organizational structure that maximizes profit for the organization members. So for some outlaw, for some gangs basically, or for some outlaw groups, that ends up looking very much like Golden Age piracy governance, where you've got democracy and a very flat structure. For other groups, such as the Sicilian Mafia, you find something that looks very different. You find a much stronger hierarchy that more closely resembles merchantship organization, for instance.
Right.
And so, again, the reason for those differences comes out of what maximizes profit in the particular context that those guys are in. But so sometimes it looks like pirate governance and other times not.
Right. Okay. Interesting. So tell me about your most recent book, Anarchy Unbound.
So that book is about, the academic literature on anarchy basically recognizes that private means of social order, that private mechanisms, private actors can secure some degree of social cooperation without government. Mm-hmm. But the argument is not very much. And it points to a couple of conditions under which the traditional mechanism of private governance, which is ordinarily sort of a reputation mechanism, the idea that if people cheat you, you don't interact with them again. So even if there isn't an explicit law, even if there isn't government there to create a law that says no stealing and anybody who's caught stealing will be put in jail, the idea is that because people develop reputations, the guys who basically steal or who, engage in fraud are shunned by a community, and so people don't interact with them anymore, and that threat causes them to behave well. And so what the academic literature shows is that mechanism breaks down under a bunch of particular conditions. And so this book, in large part, is about trying to see whether or not it's actually true that anarchy doesn't work, that private governance breaks down when those conditions are not met. And it does so through a combination of sort of economic theory and historical cases. And what motivated the book, in large part, was that, it seemed to me that when I looked to I do a lot of reading in history just because I'm interested in it. When I would look to various historical episodes where often government didn't exist, I observed social cooperation, and I also observed the conditions that, according to the academic literature, should have led cooperation not to exist. So, reality was defying basically what conventional economic theory said should be happening. And so I wondered, well, to me that suggested there must be something that the theory is missing. And so I tried to, in this book, sort of develop that. And then the other part of the book actually considers the question of, whether or not it's possible that a completely stateless society might be able to, in fact, outperform a society that has government. And for that, I end up focusing on the case of Somalia, which famously, depending upon your view, spiraled downward into anarchy after 1991, or simply entered anarchy after 1991.
And there we are back at pirates again.
Yep.
Well, that's great. I have to read that book. I haven't read that one yet, and it sounds really fascinating. Where is the best place online for people to keep track of what you're doing?
My personal website, which is www.peterleeson.com.
Great, fantastic. I'll make sure that and the books are linked up on the show notes and everything. And this has been really great. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you would like my listeners to know?
No, I think you did a terrific job.
Okay, great, wonderful. Well, I'm glad we finally got to do this. I know you are a busy guy out there speaking on the circuit, and that leads me to ask what kind of stuff do you speak on when you're out speaking?
A lot of times I speak on pirates, actually.
Oh, okay.
The other thing I do two sorts of talks. So there's discussions on pirates and popular. Those are typically popular, type talks. And then
Sure.
I do talks, academic talks that are on my sort of ongoing academic research. And the topics there depend on whatever paper I'm working on at the moment. But most recently, that sort of work I've been discussing is on European witch trials of the early modern period. I'm trying to understand. There was this incredible witch craze, basically, in the 16th century, and it took like 100,000 people were prosecuted for witchcraft, and I want to know why that happened. So I'm trying to use rational choice theory to understand it.
Fantastic. Well, we'll look for that in the next book. That sounds great.
Yeah, I actually have I'm working on a new book right now, tentatively entitled WTF, an economic tour of the weird. And it basically uses rational choice theory to sort of understand stuff like witch trials, all these sort of weird social practices and institutions.
Nice. That's fantastic. That's really great. Well, this has been fun. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I had a great time.
You bet. I hope we can talk again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, Phil.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And that's it, friends. That was my interview with Peter T. Leeson, author of The Invisible Hand and Anarchy Unbound and lots of other cool stuff. So you will be able to find links to all his books on underthecrossbones.com/043. I'll make it real easy so you don't even have to go searching anywhere. And those will be links to Amazon to get those books, which of course also supports the show. If you want to find out more about Peter Leeson, you can find him at www.petertleeson.com. We've got some comedy and music on the show today, of course. Our comedian today is a pal of mine, Cory Robinson, who I've been working with for years. Very funny dude. We're going to hear something from him. And then we're going to hear a song called Give Love by Groovy Judy. You might have heard Groovy Judy back on episode 10 of this show. I played another one of her songs. And here's the thing. I've been hunting around for some music today. Very hard to get bands to actually send me some music in a timely fashion. So I felt like hearing a little bit of Groovy Judy because it's summertime and Groovy Judy is summertime music. So we're going to hear that. All right, you ready? Here we go. Comedy from Cory Robinson and the song Give Love by Groovy Judy. Enjoy.
But I was laughing about it to myself because I was thinking about the whole Prop 8 decision because when it got voted down in the original election, gay people protested. And then when it got voted down again in the appeal, gay people protested. And I wanted gay people to riot because as a comedian, I can't think of anything funnier to see on Channel 2 News. It would be hilarious. I can't wait for that news report. Just turn on TV one day, I'll be watching Maury or something like that, and it'd be like, we interrupt your regularly scheduled programming for this important news bulletin. Thousands of gays and lesbians in the city of San Francisco have turned what was once a peaceful protest of the Prop 8 decision into a full-scale riot. Reporting live on the scene is our reporter, Cory Robinson. Cory, tell us what you see. Tom, I'm standing here in the Castro district of San Francisco. The gays have turned the Prop 8 decision into a full-scale riot, and the situation is completely turning from bad to worse. Moments ago, a group of gay arsonists started setting fire to the city with scented candles, Tom. Everything smells a little bit like cinnamon and lavender down here. The fire department has been dispatched, and they're confident they can get the blaze under control quickly because they said, and I quote, "We're used to this area being flaming all the time." Hang on a second, Tom. I'm getting another report in. Apparently, the gays have started looting the stores in the mall in the area, and we can tell you with confidence that Macy's, Saks Fifth Avenue, and Bed Bath & Beyond have been completely wiped out. There's nothing left on the store shelves. You can't get a pair of pumps, a purse, or a loofah anywhere on this side of town, Tom. It is awful. As we progress into the city, you can see the situation behind me is complete pandemonium. There's a rave going on with a group of gay men with no shirts on dancing with glow sticks. There's raining men under a disco ball over here to my right. A group of lesbians have started pickup basketball games in the street over here to my left. Hang on a second, Tom. We're getting another report in. Oh my goodness, Tom, this is the worst news yet. Apparently the gays have started breaking into people's homes in the area. They started home invasions, and they're redecorating, Tom. They're redecorating and giving makeovers against people's wills. Quite frankly, Tom, I'm scared for my safety and my manhood. I'm Cory Robinson. We're going to take it back to you in the studio, Tom.
Some positivity, 'cause it feels so good inside. Give love and you'll get love. Give love and you'll get love. Give love and you'll get love. Give love and you'll, 'cause love is beautiful and love is blind. Love is patient and love is kind. Love so strong it'll blow your mind, oh yeah. Give love, feel good inside. What you give is what you get, and you deserve the very best, yes you do. You're not getting what you need. Set that love inside of you free. Come on, 'cause it feels so good inside. Give love and you'll get love. Give love and you'll get love. Give love and you'll get love. Oh yeah. Give love and you'll give some love. Ooh, when you get some love. Give love and you'll get love. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
That's our show for today, friends. Thanks for tuning in. You can get all the show notes at underthecrossbones.com/043. If you want to find out more about Peter Leeson and his books, go to petertleeson.com. If you want to find out more about Cory Robinson, our comedian today, go to coryshowtime.com. And if you want to hear more from Groovy Judy, and I know you do, go to groovyjudy.com. Coming up next week, of course, all those links are going to be on the show notes, underthecrossbones.com/043. Coming up next week on the show, I've got an interview with Shayna Vest from dresslikeapirate.com, which was the very first pirate clothing website on the internet many moons ago. So come and check that out. If you haven't left an iTunes review yet for the show, please do that. That is very, very helpful, and I like reading them. Go give us a nice 5-star review at iTunes. It's real easy to do, and it helps the show. Again, all the show notes under thecrossbones.com/043, and I will see you next week.